and this is for now 20 years of doing this second career, but starting at my own business. If you can really handle the day-to-day 80%, the 20% doesn't throw. No. And where this idea is, well, it's all digital. I'll just put it in there, they'll look it up. That's not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to know their manuals by heart because you go over it constantly, you keep it in the culture, you explain it, they read it aloud. There's a lot of steps to this. And there's more than just words on a digital device or paper. And today, of course, it's much more digital. This thought that, well, I'll just make it as big as I want and then they can go search it. No, that's not how it works. And so that's really knowing and owning your box on the org chart. And then in our case, our company was, what differentiated us way back in the 90s and there on forward was that we decided we were going to offer a career, not a job. And that became why we were the employer of choice.
Welcome to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Kooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today, I have the opportunity of sitting down with a mentor, a coach, a friend, Al Levi, the owner of 7 Power Contractor. Al, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me and appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for our conversation. I know we're going to go in a lot of different zones, and this will be a little different than some of our other conversations where you are the coach mentor and we get to flip roles a little bit. I get to lead some of our conversation. And I guess just to begin, where are you beaming in from?
I am actually in a lovely place called Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's so
Awesome.
nice right now because we're not 150 degrees.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. That's wonderful. And where did you grow up?
I grew up, I'm sure the accent is gone, but in a place called New York City.
Yes. And you have been in the trades, your family.
Born into the trades. That's how I like to say it. Yeah. My family was in fuel oil heating, which for those who are not familiar, that's like propane heating. And so that was our business. We started in 1936 out of my grandfather's gas station. My brothers and I, my 2 older brothers, we were the 3rd generation. And I'm happy to say, gone 20 years and they're still kicking it. And my nephew is now their 4th generation with my middle brother.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Right on. So was it always known you were just going to go right into the family business?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, we did spread out into plumbing, gas heating, air conditioning, electric. So I just wanted to make sure I fit that in because that's what we eventually decided to own the whole basement. Because if we didn't, we would have been locked out of our own customer's basement. So by the time, if you want to, in my case, you wanted to see my dad, he would wake us up in the middle of the night and we would go run service calls with him. Even though there were people on, we were residential, commercial, and industrial. So I was lucky to have a very wide perspective on all of this type of stuff. And this was literally a 24/7, 365. I used to sleep with the phone next to my head and really not sleep, Matt, which is why I talk about my tagline for this business, 7 Power Contractor, from the beginning was less stress, more success. Because we were making a ton of money, but it was very much a killing process. And that's not a good goal.
What was the turning point? When did you start implementing some of the stuff that you now teach and coach on?
Yeah, our thing was the mandate from my dad. His partner was my uncle who passed away, unfortunately, too early. And then, his mantra, if you will, not so many words, was hurry up, go to work, get very busy, and the money will follow. And most times it did, but not necessarily. And it was eventually, I joined the forerunner of Nexstar, which was C2000 back in the 90s. I met the great Ellen Rohr, who's a very great friend, was a co-consultant, and actually worked in the franchise business with that we opened up Zundre franchise, which I was a member of. And I successfully sold my share to my partners so that they could get even bigger once they got me out of the way. So everybody, I was not shoved, just so you're clear. I jumped. There was the case of so many things that happened. Was we were a New York City union shop. And so they were dictating, the longer we stayed at your company, the more money we get paid. And I was, coming as a green tech, if you will, at my own company. I asked the guy one day who had been there 25 years. I go, what's the difference between the Keiko and a Bell and Gossett circulator, which is how the water pumps back there? And he goes, beat me, kid. One is green, one's red. And I was horrified at that thought that I, as a green guy, was already knowing what I know. So what we realized pretty quickly is that there was no way to do our company thing. There were a lot of these seminal moments for that. And ultimately, for me, what I wanted to do was, because of my experience and exposure in Nexstar, this whole concept was one of the great books from a changer in my life was Michael Gerber's E-Myth, which is pretty funny because it was a monster book in the 90s. And then it kind of was in the background. And now with guys like Ken Goodrich and the rest of it, it's back there in the background because it never gets old. The idea about having a systematic business. And the biggest thing I took away from that, Matt, is if I'm always working in the business and never on it, nothing is going to change. So for the first time in my life, I knew why things weren't working the way they need to. And I knew what I needed to do, which was create the structure, the org charts and the manuals and the training and things of that nature, or this was never going to change. So now I knew the what, and I got really nothing in the way of how, but I'm really good at how. And so, we took our time, we wrote the manuals, did the stuff, and I couldn't write it myself. I tried forever, man. It always came out like a law book, Article 1-6.35, and it wasn't worth in those days the paper, and nobody uses on paper now. It's all digital, but so tonality and things of that nature, which is why we spent $150,000 in today's money to write with basically a fraction of what like you have at this point. It was so valuable that we paid it off within 2 years. And people go, how could that happen? Well, first of all, we weren't a small company. We were 17 million in sales. But the big thing is we always had way more calls than we could really take, which is great. But we were blowing the opportunities left and right. CSRs couldn't book right, couldn't build sales momentum. Dispatchers couldn't maximize the schedule. Techs got to the job with the blindfolders on, didn't know what to do. And if they did all that right, they never closed the call out right with the dispatcher. And that's where all the mistakes really began. So sitting in groups and writing it with my friend, who was a great industry writer, he was masterful at this. And, getting us to use objective language versus subjective or read my mind, which is always poison. That's, well, use your common sense, Matt. As if your common sense would be my common sense. So my brother Richie would say that, in meetings sometime and go, well, just use your common sense. And finally, I went ballistic. I got up and nose to nose and go, common sense? Whose common sense? Your common sense? Like they can all read your mind? And it was pretty hostile. But ultimately, we came down to, making the best we could as far as objective. And that was really where the train got rolling. The next part of this journey along the way, which was kind of going simultaneously, is we would go to training, we would hire away. And frankly, I hate to use any other term than this, but we used to steal your techs because, we didn't want to develop our own, didn't even know that was possible. So we would pirate away guys. And when they would finally show up, and Richie and I would be these techs standing in the basement, back in our office, actually at 2:00 in the morning. And we would go, Matt was the guy that we overpaid and now blew our old pay system on him. He's only mediocre. And now all of a sudden we're in this situation of, what do we do? So finally we just came to the arrangement where we just realized, you know what? We're going to take young, willing apprentices with no skills and get them up the ladder or the org chart to become willing techs with great skills. And that is what really took it to the next level.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Kooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommer Garage Door Openers. We believe Sommers are the best in the business when it comes to garage door openers. We always recommend them for residential installs because of the many features they have, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features like a fixed chain that runs along a secure rail for a quiet and safe operation. Click the link to find out more about Sommer Garage Door Openers.
Yeah. So what we're talking about, just to bring listeners up to speed, because, we've got listeners that are in the trades or in another business or community members in general, but your 7 Power Contractor brings in manuals, which is part of an SOP system and process. And what I've heard you say, and I think this is applicable, is it allows employees to come in and not have to guess what the owner's thinking on any given day.
Yes.
And in some ways, it helps the owner get out of the way.
Micromanaging. We're really great at macromanaging. And also, my line was always the same, that on any given day, there were either too many Levies or not enough. And, because good luck, employee, trying to figure out which Levy you're supposed to make happy today. When we never had an org chart, everybody just, what happens is everybody just fills the void and jumps in or doesn't jump in. And both are bad scenarios. So the scenario I always used is if you need, in our case, if we needed a crane to put an air conditioning unit up on a roof, before it was defined, we either had no cranes or 2 cranes. Both are bad because the job was not defined as to who was doing it. And this, I don't care what trade you're in. You know what I just said. I thought you were going to order that. No, I thought that was your job to order. So there's no definition of it. And that org chart really is where you start to take control of things, what I call like the bingo board for running a company without all the fancy titles. And then it's about putting the manuals that cover those boxes. And it's only 80% of what goes on, but that 80% is the most critical stuff they need to know.
Yeah, no, this is great, Alan. This is going to fall in our better business kind of category for the podcast, and it's applicable for any business. So
any business.
Don't turn this off if you're in the restaurant business or hospitality, right? This is all applicable because we're talking about structure to be able to guide human behavior. And I want to dive into that 80% you mentioned, because one of my struggles before you and I met, and this is, to be sure, an ongoing journey. Like I'm ongoingly implementing manuals and structuring SOPs, but there is a certain level where I was blocked because I got into overwhelm. I didn't want to, and it was like, okay, how detailed do I get? And if we go to 100%, there's no way to cover all the 100%. But what you're saying is kind of using the 20-80 rule. And if we cover 80%, the other 20% is still going to happen, still going to bubble up, but it's going to be manageable because we're not dealing with all the other fires because we've got 80% covered. Is that kind of the game?
Yeah, it is. I will tell you, this is for now 20 years of doing this second career, but starting at my own business. If you can really handle the day-to-day 80%, the 20% doesn't throw. No. And where this idea is, well, it's all digital. I'll just put it in there, they'll look it up. That's not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to know their manuals by heart because you go over it constantly. You keep it in the culture. You explain it. They read it aloud. There's a lot of steps to this. And there's more than just words on a digital device or paper. And today, of course, it's much more digital. This thought that, well, I'll just make it as big as I want and then they can go search it. No, that's not how it works. And so that's really knowing and owning your box on the org chart. And then in our case, our company was, what differentiated us way back in the 90s and there on forward was that we decided we were going to offer a career, not a job. And that became why we were the employer of choice. Now, that also meant taking the manuals and leveraging them in the right training center, hands-on training center, building the curriculum, which is the bridge between your manuals and your training center, and then us becoming better trainers. Because we always relied on outside trainers, but the problem with trainers, they come in 2 flavors. One is they're somebody who really knows their subject. They're experts. Problem is they're so boring, you will be asleep. And so unless you know how to learn in your sleep, not very helpful. And then there are those who are very dynamic, charismatic, funny teachers. But heaven forbid you ask them any question with any depth, and pretty soon you know they don't know what they're talking about. So we as owners and management need to take on this training so that we can help build them our way, not just built in the industry way. And then we get to control more of it. And that takes us building our training skills. So that's how you get this pipeline going. In my case, I used to train 5 willing apprentices through a whole process in what I call now signature staffing system, which builds on the manuals Because ultimately, yeah, we want to take control of the company. I get it. Been there, done that. But ultimately, we ought to go and grow. And how do you do that? How do you get all these great techs? Here's the great news. The majority of my clients through the years during this tech shortage we just went through, they had plenty of techs, not just enough for now, but they were growing during COVID. Growing techs. Also, I wanted to get to the don't dial out thing. I've worked with a commercial photographer. So if you think that this doesn't apply to you, commercial photographer, a condo builder, kitchen cabinetry, garage door manufacturer, commercial roofing, all of the things that I was never in, it is still the same thing. Those 7 powers: planning, operations, staffing, sales coaching, marketing, finance. Those are the 7 things, or your foundation for any type of business.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think that your clients are not necessarily experiencing a labor shortage?
I think it's because they bought into this idea of finding lightning in a bottle over and over again, which is a willing tech who has great skills, really difficult. And if they came to your shop for extra money, they're going to go to somebody else for extra money. So we used to call, years ago, we called them dollar hoppers, because they'd hop to your shop and then hop on. So just building them from scratch and giving them careers going up the org chart is what has changed that dynamic. And, in my case, I have guys, they're actually retired now, the ones that I had trained. But, they came for us 20, 30 years and were effective as they moved through every position in the company that they had earned. Nothing is given. You earn it.
Yeah. It's a testament to the human spirit wanting to be a part of something that's bigger. And, I think a lot of people want to come into something. Maybe there's an intimidation factor if they don't already have a skill set, but what we're talking about is breaking that down so we find good-hearted humans that align with a culture, and then we train them up and we have the system in place to be able to guide their behaviors and give them that incentive to grow.
Yes, it's exhausting to rewire people constantly. I'm just going to tell you. Also, one day I walked in, asked about something. Well, I walked into my office and I had an awful night's sleep. It was filled with nightmares. And what was the nightmare about? I walked into we were in a very small office, about the size you see here. My dad was a firm believer that we don't make any money with you sitting here. Go out and do something. And so when we sat in this office, I came in and told him, I woke up in a cold sweat. I feel like a hostage at my own company. How do you guys feel? They go, we feel the same way. What are you going to do about it? And that was what started that journey about putting, and it all starts with the org charts, the manuals, and then that goes next level to staffing, which is this next process of how do you take a willing apprentice, no skills, to a willing tech with great skills. And then no matter how big you grow your company, we call the hub and spoke, but the way that we did it, which is getting field supervisors into position. Now, they don't ride around all day, but they help manage their team. Otherwise, no matter how great your service manager, install manager is, they become a choke point at the company. They can't manage 25 techs, no matter how good those techs are. And the other problem is if you don't train them in your house, then you have to train them at somebody else's house. And that on-the-job training, which we never like to say out loud, but years ago, that's how we train people, is very inconsistent, incomplete, and really close to useless, but better than nothing.
Yeah, I get that. What would you say to a business owner, whether they're in home service trades or elsewhere, that might be feeling some of the chaoticness and have a desire to get things anchored down? Like, where do we start?
Yeah, so when I did one-to-one consulting, and people paid me a lot of money for that, 6 figures to do, a couple of years of work there. And I'm happy to say nobody asked for a refund. But the reality is, plan. And Ellen had a great line, plan or be planned for. That's how your life goes. So what I mean that is planning power is all the great ideas that you have in your head, because you're in every Facebook group, industry group that is. You go to webinars, seminars, in person. You have friends in a network. There's no shortage of great ideas. It's just a shortage of ideas implemented. So you put it at the top of the funnel in that big hopper in the master project list, and then you let them work their way down the list. So they work their way down with a filter, which is it either fixes the biggest problem or challenge for greatest chance to grow and be profitable. So you get down to your top 30, and that's what you'd want to do in 1 year. And then you take those same filters, fix the biggest problem or challenge or greatest chance to grow and be profitable, and you get down to your top five, because that's all you could effectively work on. And when you get down to your top 5, here's the deal. I don't care how crazy your week was, Mr. or Ms. Owner. I don't care. But you said these 5 things will fix your biggest problem or challenge or give you the greatest chance to grow and be profitable. So what else are you doing that's more important than that? So a portion of your week needs to be dedicated to work on that. And what that does is get you what the goal of Plenty Power is, working on the right thing in the right way at the right time. Otherwise, it's everybody yelling at you, which is where that source of confusion comes in.
Yes. Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yes, it is. So every next great idea you have, guess where it goes, Matt? Top of the funnel.
Yeah.
It has to work its way down that funnel to earn its attention. When it hits that top 5, then we get to work.
Yeah. Now, we've had this conversation. I've heard you say that before, but just hearing it again, I mean, part of it's having the repetition and the reminder to utilize that tool, but it is a challenge, as a business owner to prioritize and make decisions, right? Because I think for me, and I would imagine this could play in other people's minds, is I make a decision, I focus here, but I'm also giving up something at the same time. And how do I know
you're speaking to control? I mean, let's face it. Most of us who have risen to owners, we were really once a great tech. And what made us a great tech is our attention to detail and perfection. So what sabotages us as owners is our demanding perfection and never settling for anything less than perfection. I'm not saying to just mail it in, not even close. But one of the great phrases I taught myself to say at the end of the day, good enough for today, I'll make it better in the future, I'm getting this out of the world. Because whatever great ideas that I have or things that I'm working on that never see the light of day are worthless. Worthless.
Yeah.
Got to get it out into the world. And so that's really your incentive. And you're only going to grow so big if you have to do everything. Let's face it. I did pretty much every job. I ran for truck parts. I worked in the field as, for tech. I was a big ticket salesperson. I was pretty good because in a part-time job, 1990s, I was selling $1 million a year. Now, yes, I did have the power of being owner, but this is my point. Could I clone myself? Well, if you guys out there listening can clone yourself, stop listening to anything in this podcast. Congratulations. Yeah, we couldn't do it back then, even when there was a sheep that was, first time we even heard of the concept of cloning. It's not going to happen. And so I'm not saying the better you take a clean slate and train them your way, and you can't train them your way until you define what is your way. That's my point. So that's why there's only 2 types of companies I ever worked with, Matt. Either they're really small, good companies, sometimes family members, or partners that grew up as friends and partners. But what they run into is there's only so many hours in a day, days in a week, weeks in a month. They run out of time. They can't clone themselves. And so they need those systems, those 7 building blocks we talked about. And then they need to put these systems, the org charts, the manuals, and then they need to get on this staffing business, which is leveraging them to start making people their own way. Mm-hmm. Guess what? The biggest, best companies that I came to, already figured out how to make the phone ring off the hook. The bad news for them, Matt, is every time the phone rang, it was gasoline to a fire because they couldn't handle it. So what did they need? They needed the same 7 building blocks. They needed the same org charts. They needed the same manual, and they needed to get the staffing train moved.
Yes. Oh, man. I've got a couple of different questions bubbling up. Do you think, for a listener, that might be catching wind of this and be like, all right, this is sound, good idea. I also recognize that, maybe these manuals play into culture, but there's also a piece of culture that may play into the manuals, right? And then there's branding, there's marketing. As a business, like, I guess my question to you is where would you put the manuals and this organization in priority with branding, with marketing, with anything else that an owner might be able to play with?
I already have one stock analogy for this whole thing, and that is, the motivational speaker Anthony got his last name. Oh, guy's really tall.
Robbins,
thank you, Anthony Robbins.
Yes.
And so he creates a program for 30 days that's designed to change the rest of your life for success. And what he finds out is that people are not willing to invest 30 days to change the rest of their life. So he has to get it down to 7 days to change the rest of your life. So I come up with the 7 powers, which has dynamically changed my life and worked with people. But I find out that they don't want to do all of the 7 things, because one of the things you just mentioned is marketing power. And so I go, okay, I want you to know all 7, but I'm going to make a shortcut for you. Use 2 things: more calls, more texts. That is what you need to do for the rest of your life, not one or the other, both. So what I mean by more calls is like a bathtub full of calls, right amount of calls from the right customer, right time. And then be careful is the drain is open on your bathtub. If your CSRs stink, the drain is open. So that is your goal. And your goal is actually to overflow the tub. Because if you make more calls than you can usually do in a day, you charge the price you need to. You get to decide where you're going and what you're charging and the work that you will do and won't do. And it also forces you to grow in a good way. And more techs is not just warm bodies. In the case of service techs, they're great communicators, which leads to great sales. They're neat and clean. Their truck's neat and clean. The job site's neat and clean. They get the review from the customer. They close the call out with the dispatcher. And technically, they were here today because my garage door was crashed, which means the door is either up, door is down, or it's halfway. Both are bad. All 3 of those are bad. And so tomorrow, I don't want to push the button and I find out I'm back in the same situation. So that's the technical aspect of it. Installers, still under the more tech category, they don't do sales, but what they do is communicate with the customer to make sure that what they're doing, customer understands. They're neat and clean, truck's neat and clean, the job site neat and clean. I'm not going to flatten your tires and let Parker screws all over the driveway. And then I make sure that it's worked, commissioned, and you understand how to use my queue. Because if I don't, then the service department has to come back, and that's what we call a callback, and that's a drain. So those are really the 2 things you focus on. And you're still using the same metrics of master project, top 30, top 5 to address those issues.
I love that. Okay. So for the business owners listening, we've got somebody that's interested in implementing. We're ready to go. We've got the option of buying Al's manuals and implementing. I can write them myself and implement. You and I had a great conversation prior to recording. We could go to the ChatGPT AI, have that thing spit out manuals. I can see nuances to all of them, but at the end of the day, we've got to anchor them and bring them down to reality for our culture and exactly what we've got going on, which means owner has to make some decisions. So can you speak to some of the implementation? I mean, maybe all 3 are viable. I think there's some I think there's some disconnect with an AI kind of spitting it. I think it's very difficult to write it out, but
I'm going to share, first of all, I love technology. I don't like technology. I love technology, and I believe firmly in automation. And that was groomed into me by my dad, because he back then was ahead of his time and always would spend up for good technology. But technology has to have a purpose and a design to handle. And this thought that it's just automatic and I could speak into my microphone and tell you what I want is kind of like bringing my executive secretary and go, yeah, give me some manuals. And they're going to go out, and how is that going to fit your culture? And how do we even know it's true? That's really the issue of it. It's an assistant, kind of like years ago, somebody was promoting that you don't even need manuals anymore. You just need a bunch of videos. I am a strong believer in videos, but it's the dessert. It's not the main course. The manuals and the org chart is the structure, the backbone to which all other additional training can be done, like short loom videos, which are great, short loom videos. There are a lot of things that you can do. You can even do as you're out on a job and go, hey, I'm on a job, this door is crashed, watch what I'm going to do. Those are good additional things. They're not a substitute for well-written manuals. And that's really, how can I get one guy, 10 guy, 100 guys, in the case of 1,000 guys, to pretty much do it the Kooler Doors way, or whatever trade you're in that way. So this concept of AI versus AL is, in my opinion, it's not one or the other, but if I had to choose, it's because, yes, you might sound like I'm prejudiced. Mine is time tested, not time tested like ancient. It's time tested right now, right this minute. That's that's the difference between the two. So really back to what we wanted to make sure I cover here.
I guess the implementation, because you're right, you've got the time-tested piece, and there's still nuances for any company to implement. And in my experience, is reading through line by line with my entire team, and then every week pulling out pieces to review and read.
Yes, that's how you keep it in the culture, because you mentioned culture before. So this isn't something we're shoving down their throats. This is our opportunity. So it actually starts at the beginning with the org charts. Is why would I care about your org chart, Matt, if I work for your company? Here's the 4 reasons. Where am I today, whether I like it or not? Where can I go tomorrow with you if you are really promising your career? Who really is my boss? Because when I walk around this place, everyone yells at me. And the last one is, if it's not in my manuals and not in my training, who can I go to for help? And they cannot yell at me. And then with that, the manuals that apply to each of these boxes are covering the 80%. So I'm training you up right now so that when you go out in the field, what I'm hoping to do is catch you doing that and make a big deal about it. That's really the goal of it. Now, how do you keep it in traction? Is by having a weekly meetings after it's been fully rolled out. They stand up and they read 1 to 2 pages aloud. And this is the chance they get to put their fingerprints on versus hijack. So that if they have a better, cheaper, faster way, and we all agree, then we're going to edit this to reflect that. They're not set in stone, but they're not being rewritten each and every time. They're being tweaked as you go along, which is what keeps it in the culture. That's really where the buy-in. And the buy-in actually starts further back, is in the editing process. The biggest mistakes, and I walk this through with all the videos and also the workbook that's in the program, is we know the tone of what you're saying. Because if you're going to turn this into a don't manual in your own attempt to write it, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. For any of you listening that have kids, please tell me how effective it is when you tell your kid, don't. It's really worthless. And so that's really more, we want to keep it in a do manual. And the tonality of it, because it's read aloud, is that it sounds like my big brother or big sister is coaching, not yelling at me. And how do I know you're yelling? Because the font is 45, or it's in bold, or worse yet, underlined and red. If that worked, I would suggest you make all of your manuals font 48, all red and all underlined. It doesn't work. It's as effective as the sign in your office that says, over the sink, your mom doesn't live here, clean your own dishes. Sure, that's working really well.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. How might listeners get in touch with you, learn more?
Yeah, so I offer a free 30 minutes to any contractor. And all you need to do is go to AL at the number 7 powercontractor.com and just, email me, and I'm happy to set that up, send you the steps. Or you can go to my website, the number 7 powercontractor.com. There's a lot of information there. I've been writing blogs for a few thousand years. So there's plenty of information. It's really searchable. It's really concise. There's blog videos. There's a lot of information right there. And it does have my products, the operating manuals and the staffing system that then builds on it. Those are good things to kind of look at no matter which way you decide to go. And there, right there, there's on the bottom, it says connect with Al. You're welcome to just go there and say, type me a message, and we will get to a call or a Zoom meeting for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not a sales call. It's my give back to the industry.
It's an amazing value. So anybody listening, I would encourage you to take Al up on that. Like I've said, we've engaged, I've hired you to come into my little company and really help me structure it. And it's added massive value. And I think this is important for anybody running a company, because ultimately that extends into the community. Like a well-run company is going to have an impact in community. And that's certainly one thing that drives me. But it does structure it for the employee, makes the lifestyle different, better, more consistent. So I appreciate your work. And again, if you're not a contractor, I'd still encourage you to check out Al's components, because it is around this structure. And the book mentioned of E-Myth is a good one, right? Because the organization is exactly it. It needs to be organized. So at any rate, Al, I really appreciate what you bring in. It's definitely on a master level. You've been in the game long enough and taken the school of knocks, right?
That's a nice way to say it. So thank you, Matt.
Well, it's true. Like I go and I search for people that really know their stuff and play at a mastery level. And you're one of those folks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. What, to close out our conversation today, Al, what are you excited for?
I'm excited that the industry and all industries tend to be waking up these days. When, I started so many years ago, we just went to a house, we barely spoke to a customer. We just, we really wanted them to stop talking so we could get down to work. And then somebody would send them a bill. They would, looking back, and hindsight is always perfect, right? We left them in the dark. Today, customers are educated. You cannot do this old sales method of sell on the least amount of information. Your job, I don't care what you do, is you are there to protect me, the customer, from doing something stupid. I am still the customer. Your job is to make great recommendations, to do your background, your research, and be fully trained so that you can help me arrive at a good decision. That's your goal. I actually teach people it's the customer has to win first, so the company can win second, so the employees can win third, and fourth, the owner does.
Yes, love that. Well said.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. We count on your subscriptions, your likes, your shares, and I encourage you to do that now. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, lower right-hand button. If you're on audio, download this, share it, and we look forward to having you on the next one.